Okay, well, today I want to welcome Abe Hunter. Abe is somebody I don't know well, but I will say somehow I felt a deep connection to you. So I know Abe because he put on some magnificent opera events at my cafe, transformed our event space into this beautiful twinkling spot, and was also really easy to work with. I mean, we made some mistakes and you were very generous. So you're the founder of the Lead Society.
Yes,
I always want to say lied, but it's lead, right?
it is Lied, the German word for song.
For song. And I don't know, you work in law somehow, as I recall. I don't remember.
So yeah, I previously worked as a legal assistant for a big downtown firm.
Okay.
I no longer do that. It was a great source of stress and anxiety, as working for attorneys can lead to. Right now, I'm working in healthcare.
Oh, nice. Okay, good. So you made major transitions.
Yes.
So I didn't know you that well. We had a couple of connections that way. And one day I opened my Facebook and there's a message and you said, after multiple attempts at suicide, I'm going into treatment. Please send me books. And I just, that struck me so deeply. I can't even tell you. Is this a common thing when people go into treatment? They ask people for books?
No, I didn't realize. I didn't know what to expect, so I wanted to have some reading material and some inspiration while I was there.
Yeah.
Little did I know I would have little time for reading.
They keep you busy.
Yes.
Okay, so what else would you like to share about who you are?
Well, my background is as a pianist. I started playing as a kid, and I went on to study music in college, and worked. I was entrepreneurial, so I did a lot of freelance work and lots of musical theater and lots of opera. I founded an opera company in Bemidji, a summer opera festival. We did fully staged productions, and I went on to spend summers in Europe, where I was apprenticing as an opera coach, and yeah, and then I got a real job in 2013 working in the legal field, and I did that for several years. I also in between, I swore off working for attorneys once, and then I ended up going back. But in between, I worked for an international fine art dealer and did some other things. I always did music while I was working a day job, and starting projects and doing things of that nature. And in 2019, I founded the Lead Society for the advancement of art song. And we did some really great things. And then the pandemic happened and we had to retool. And I started a podcast and interviewed everyone from internationally acclaimed stars like Thomas Hampson and Stephanie Blythe to up and coming talent. And it was really a lot of fun.
And I actually caught a number of those podcasts.
Yes.
COVID. And even for somebody who's not a particularly versed person in opera, I found it really enjoyable, and just artists talking about their process and who they are. And
yeah, that's what we really tried to do with that was make it not talk shop a whole lot.
Yeah.
Really make it about the human being and make it fun.
Yeah.
Some of the guests were taken off guard by that, but I won them over in the end. And it was so much fun to discuss music at a human level.
Yeah.
What we tried to do.
I thought it was a very human podcast and very creative, because as we all suffered through COVID, I mean, that was a great way for you to make connections during that time. Yeah,
Absolutely.
So a kid grows up in Bemidji and travels internationally with opera. That strikes me as a unusual childhood.
It is, and being Native American too, and minority is not without its adversity, and it just goes to show that anyone can do it.
Yeah.
So I like to be sure that people know that it doesn't matter where you're from,
Right.
or what your background is, you can do whatever you want.
Yes, that's beautiful. Are you a member of the band up there? Who's in Bemidji? Is that Red
I'm
Lake?
a registered member of Rainy River First Nations, which is in Canada. So I'm actually a Canadian citizen.
Oh, wow.
And Rainy River is located just on the other side of Rainy River from International Falls, about 40 miles west.
Is that near Lac LaCroix?
I don't know.
We used to go up to International Falls, and you'd have to take a boat in to this
Oh.
tiny Canadian reserve. It was an amazing trip that I took a couple of times. Yeah, interesting. So tell me about, were your multiple attempts at suicide condensed, or was that like over a big period of time?
It was multiple attempts over a few years. I've always struggled with mental health, depression, and anxiety, and it wasn't until 2019 that I actually received a bipolar diagnosis,
Oh, wow.
which sort of explained a lot of things. The mania and the lows and the highs, and you never really being sort of here. Those moments were rare, was always,
Mhm.
a roller coaster. But that explained a lot of things. I was able to get some medication to help treat that, and it helped when I took it. And that was sort of one of the problems. And actually, I did have so alcohol was always a part of my life. I had my first drink at 18 and sort of drank. I mean, I always loved it because made me sociable and funny and uninhibited. I'm a pretty shy, introverted person. And although you might not know that, when I get on stage, I can sort of turn it on. But yeah, so alcohol helped with that regard. And it's a progressive illness, and I always functioned. I was always able to do really great things and work and be successful. So it wasn't a problem per se until it was. And actually, after a attempt in my life in 2018 in June, I stopped drinking for a year and a half.
Mhm.
And I didn't do it with any aid or any help. I just stopped. And yeah, things were going great during that time. And when I went back out to do more research, as they say, it picked up right where it left off. I thought I could drink normally.
Yeah.
And it was like I never set the bottle down.
That's a strange phenomenon, isn't it?
Very.
I've heard that story many times, and it is interesting how that's what it is. I know that people say, yeah, I can drink now, and it just, bam, they're back at it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was really brave of you to put that out publicly. And what was the response you got?
It was overwhelming. It remains my most well-liked Facebook post. I didn't know what to expect. I was in the darkest spot I'd ever been in my life.
Okay.
And I just needed to say something. And I don't know what I was thinking, because it is a pretty personal thing to share. And, a lot of people thought I was crazy for doing it. But it felt so good to just clear the air and maybe provide some source of hope for people that are struggling. And I was certainly struggling, and I needed support. And the outpouring of support and letters and things that I got, I mean, it brought me to tears every time, and I was getting them every day. So it was really, really overwhelming. People I thought would never even speak to me again, frankly, reached out and were really glad that I was getting help.
Isn't that something? I thought it was incredibly courageous. And then I also was struck with how little we know about people that we know.
Mhm.
Like we see people all the time, and we just don't really know what's happening in their life. That's how it struck me. And it was just,
Yes, I mean, addiction comes in many different forms, and we become really, really good at hiding it, and it leads to isolation. And the pandemic, it was the perfect storm. I have no doubt that I would have reached the point of going to treatment eventually, but COVID accelerated it.
yeah,
Working from home and the isolation is deadly.
yes. In fact, I haven't been through treatment or anything, but there was a time at the beginning of COVID where I was just putting down a bottle of wine a night, and all of a sudden it was just like, whoa, what are you doing? And I stopped myself. But
Mhm.
it really, that isolation was very real. And that was just my go-to. I would go to work, I would come home and be by myself. And and I just was like, what are you doing? Yeah, but
Yeah,
it's real. It's a real thing. Yeah.
absolutely.
And so then I didn't hear anything about you. And one day I'm driving down the street. I don't know how much longer that was, 6 months, maybe
Probably
longer,
about the 3 or 4 month mark.
3 or 4 months. I'm
Mhm.
driving down West 7th and I see this guy strolling down the street, and I'm like, oh my God, that's Abe. So I go driving around a few blocks to find you. And I was just so happy that you were alive.
Well, that was so funny because I went for a walk, and I just needed a sign that I was on the right direction, and there you pull up.
Oh, wow.
And it was remarkable, and it was just when I needed, and it just goes to show that when you are, if you're keep an open mind, signs and guidance will make itself available to you. And there you were, and you were just the person I wanted to see and that needed to see. So yeah, that was just really a special moment for me.
That's so interesting. I appreciate you saying that, because as I was like driving around the blocks, I'm just like, what are you doing? And then I just followed it. And I could see when I pulled up in front of you, you were a little bit thrown off balance. And it was
Well, I
kind of,
wasn't expecting a sign.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And it was and I anyway, that was a very touching moment for me as well. So now here you are, and tell me what's going on.
Yeah, so I am about 6.5 months since my last drink, and I did it by with really the help of Hazelden. I can't recommend them enough. It was instrumental, and what I did differently this time was listen. I did 28 days at their main facility in Center City. And then they said, we really recommend, I thought I'd be cured and ready to go and get back and to making money in the legal field. And
Yeah.
they said, no, we really think you should do 5 weeks of day treatment at our St. Paul facility and live there at Fellowship Club, which is located in St. Paul, which is a beautiful facility.
Yes,
Um,
river there.
And I did it. And then I thought, okay, it's only 5 more weeks. I will do this and then hit the ground running. And we got towards the end of that. And they said, we really would recommend 4 months of intensive outpatient. And I thought, 4 months, are you out of your minds? But okay, because I never want to do this again.
Yeah.
I'd seen people that this was their third or fourth or fifth or 10th treatment. And I thought, my God,
Yeah.
I have too much stuff to do to do this. I want to do this the right way the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I did. I did 4 months of intensive outpatient and stayed there. And I'm so glad I did, because if I hadn't, I don't think I'd be talking to you right now.
Yeah.
It was imperative for my recovery to have the support and surround myself with people that are also in recovery
Yeah.
to be successful.
Yeah.
So recently, I moved out of there earlier this month, and now living on West 7th in a beautiful apartment that's just a block from my work at United Hospital.
Yes.
And I am doing great. I love it. I've got my dog back and creating music and have my life back.
Yeah. Yeah. You must be my neighbor, because I'm not too far from United Hospital. That's nice. I didn't know that.
Yes.
So it is a hard road, I think. And for people who have been through it multiple times, I'm someone who struggled with smoking and quit multiple times. And, I think it's really important that sometimes for some people, it does take sometimes. And it's
Absolutely. And the most important thing is that people keep coming back.
exactly. Exactly.
There's absolutely no judgment
Right.
on anyone's part. I think it's remarkable and brave when people come back and keep trying.
Yeah.
I can't say I take things one day at a time. Who knows, maybe I'll be back someday, but hopefully it's to speak and tell my story as opposed to being a patient. But I just think that there are so many resources, so much help out there for people to seek, and that's available for people. I just wish people would reach out for help, because it's there. In St. Paul and the Twin Cities in general, I had no idea about, probably because I was always at happy hour, but it's a remarkable, it is, people come here to get sober.
Yes.
There's over 1,000 meetings a week for whatever ails you.
Yeah.
Every time of day. And the community is just absolutely incredible. So you probably don't even know somebody that's in recovery, because there's so many people out there.
I don't know if this is still the case, but for a while, you'd meet all these people from the East Coast in New York, and it was always like, oh, they're here for treatment, because you knew there was no other reason that they would have moved here.
Well, I hear stories of people that came here for treatment and never left, and that's
what I mean.
20
Yeah.
years ago. So it's really interesting, and it just goes to show that St. Paul especially is just such a special place, and part of the reason why I moved here from Northeast Minneapolis.
Yeah, and it's brought us a lot of very creative people as well, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
So treatment, addiction and creativity really go hand in hand, don't they?
They do. Yes.
You have any ideas of why that might be?
I think that for some people, myself included, that I thought that it helped with creativity, and maybe in some respects, on occasion, it might have, but in hindsight now, with some clarity and some foresight, I just don't. I'm more creative now than I ever have been. I don't know. I don't know the answer to why creatives struggle so much with addiction. Or maybe it's just more knowing that they do, and because I think it doesn't matter your background or socioeconomic class or any number of factors.
Yeah.
This disease does not discriminate. And I think we tend to see artists and musicians and stuff because there's public facing. So maybe we just know more about them.
Awesome. Yeah.
but and it's also just part of the culture of being an artist. You know, you're always working the room, you know, you're always on, you always have to be out and self-promoting, and alcohol is a great way to to have that, and there's always alcohol around.
Yes. Yeah.
And people perform at bars and nightclubs and orchestra, you know, it's just they go hand in hand. And I think there's an expectation too that you need alcohol to have fun or to be sophisticated. I don't know, you know, it's all the things I thought.
Yeah.
That I needed to have a glass of wine or champagne when I went to the symphony, and a lot of times I don't even remember going. I'm glad that that's not the case anymore. But so to answer your question, I don't know why.
Yeah. Sometimes, I mean, I have a few, I think, you know, artists really can be publicly more vulnerable than other people.
Mhm.
And sometimes I think it's part of that you're really putting yourself out there in a very different way. And then two, I think at the beginning, it does kind of loosen you up, but then that line changes very quickly.
It does. You know, another thing I thought of was that for me, you know, it helped at first, you know, I used it to quiet the mind and just have some relief from the anxiety and things of that nature. But then you're anxious, you drink because you're anxious and anxious because you drank, and it's just this vicious, it's this merry-go-round.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing too, creative people and bipolar people.
Yeah.
They use it as an aid to just have some stillness in their mind, but it doesn't work.
It's interesting. I'm not going to out him. A young man I know was doing mushrooms, and I said, you know, you can get that by meditating. He just looked at me, and I'm like, you know, you really can. You don't have to take that drug to expand your mind in that way. And hopefully he will turn to meditation, but at least I planted the seed there.
Well, it's you mentioned meditation. That's a huge part of Hazelden's you know, toolkit.
Interesting.
Meditation.
I didn't know that.
And I struggled with meditation because I thought it was, you had to, the goal was to not have any thoughts and just become this sort of, I don't know, this like Zen, have these transfigurative moments. And I learned that you don't have to punish yourself if thoughts enter your mind or your mind wanders. That's okay. And so I need to get better in my meditation practice. And like other things, like an instrument, you have to practice it.
Yes.
You have to do it daily. Otherwise you don't improve. It's hard to improve. And I'm not a natural at it. I really struggle. So I do, you know, I'm lucky if I do a couple minutes every day.
But that's a start. I mean,
it's a start, right?
Yeah. I think that's interesting. I think that's a big misconception that people have, is that you like put everything out of your mind. Some people know I teach meditation, and what we like to do is we say hello to all those things that come into us, because they're there anyway, whether we acknowledge them or not. And so when you start to say hello to those different things that float through, you begin to see exactly what is there and whose energy is there. And, oh, is that my mother telling me this? And, oh, is that my boss telling me this? And you begin to start to parse out what's going on, instead of just having this big mash of constant voices and anxiety. So it's really, a couple minutes a day is a great start. And the more you get comfortable into just falling into that space, I call it space, where nothing needs to happen, the more comfortable you get there, the longer you can do it. Even if you just find yourself like sitting at a coffee shop, staring out the window, sometimes like a blank mind, that is meditation. You know, people don't really realize it, but that is what that is. It's a
Right.
contemplation, you know.
It's
Yeah,
really something you can do at any time. And when I do feel anxious or feel a sense of that I need to just sort of reset, even just a few seconds or you could, but it's something that you can do at any time. It doesn't matter where you're at.
right.
Um, but again, it's something that has really become valuable to me. And I think that everyone should try it. And studies have shown that it's just as effective as an antidepressant or
Yeah.
things of that nature. So why not have some free therapy?
I'm telling you, you don't need mushrooms. You find altered states. Um, so what was there a particular event or person this last time that made you decide to do treatment again, or what was the prompter at this point in your life?
I had just had enough. I had uh, been let go of a job in July, and I was just sort of living and existing, and my drinking had become unmanageable, and I was miserable, and
Yeah,
I needed it to live, and and I didn't want to live anymore. I didn't want to live like that.
yeah,
So um, luckily, my family was very supportive and got me into Hazelden after I got out of the hospital. So um, on my own, I don't know that I would have done that. I don't think was, I didn't want to. I just didn't want to do it, but I did. And I'm glad that my tune changed, that that was a transformative experience, that 28 days in Center City.
yeah. Well, because right, how long has it been since you hadn't had a drink in 28 days? Probably a long time.
Yeah, very
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah. Wow. So that's nice that your family so you had close people who knew what was happening.
Yes, yeah, that saw the deterioration, and my life had really become unmanageable.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. Wow. And so now, are you still going to do stuff with the Lead Society? Is that sort of on pause?
Yeah, that's as I sort of get my footing back and reconstruct my life and live in this new lifestyle. I'm excited to start creating again, but one of my problems is impulsivity. So I'm trying to do what I can to let things just happen, as opposed to create another project. And some of that's indicative of bipolar, but
Yeah.
also just who I am. So yes, the Lead Society is there, and I think about it and how to do it smartly, and how to do it without disrupting my stability.
Right. Right. That seems very wise choice.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you don't want to throw a lot of pressure on yourself and yeah, get your footing back for sure. I just think it was very unusual what you did and really beautiful. I heard a lot of beautiful music from there.
Thank you. In fact, just on Friday, I was in the former Black Dog space during the art crawl and with some friends, and I said, "Oh, we did Schubert karaoke here," and they're like, "You did what?" I said, "Yeah, we we did Schubert karaoke. It's never been done, and
That was
that
like
was
a
so much
brunch,
fun."
right? I think it was a daytime brunch. It was beautiful.
Yes, and then we, of course, the when we did the dinner in the beautiful event space. So things like that, of course, I'm chomping at the bit to do again. I just really want to make sure that I'm sure-footed.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That makes total sense. Yeah, that Schubert karaoke was phenomenal.
Yeah, that was so much fun. And people came from as far away as I think Des Moines and Madison to come sing at that. And, you
Mm.
know, my favorite part about that whole thing was, of course, you know, the turnout was extraordinary, but it was the people that came just to eat brunch and were like, what is going on? Because if you had told them they were going to sit through 3 hours of German lied, they would have never have agreed to go to brunch, but they loved it.
I'm going to agree with you. I think the people who walked in not knowing what was happening, that was the greatest part of it in a way. Yeah, and to just expose all those people to something they maybe have never heard before.
Right. And that's was the whole impetus behind Lead Society, was to bring the art form of art song to a greater audience, because it's so easy. It's easier to digest as compared to, you know, 2 or 3 hour opera. They're
Yeah.
short pieces. It's poetry set to music, and much of it is very accessible to audiences, and we were doing it.
Yes, yes. There's something interesting too about listening to music and even in another language, how much of the emotion comes through.
Hmm.
I think that's not always my son is half French, and so he plays a lot of CDs of Jacques Brel or different people who are singing. And it's can be really moving, even though you don't even know what's being said. And
Yeah,
that's a beautiful part of music. Yeah.
absolutely.
We're so used to saying, I don't know what that is, I don't understand. And so you write it off. But if you just allow yourself to just let it be there, it's something new can open up for you, something can happen.
Yes, and that's been my whole part of the experience at Center City, was to, because I always considered myself to be an open-minded person, but I really found out that I had a long ways to go.
Mm,
Um, and I'm really thankful for that.
that's a great discovery. It really is.
So, so I think for folks, try something new and experience something new and get out of your comfort zone. And that's the main, it's another thing, is just to be okay with, you don't have to like being uncomfortable. No one does.
Right.
But be okay with uncomfort, discomfort, and knowing that that moment will pass.
It's interesting because I've told some people this before, but my ex-partner was a big free jazz guy, and we'd go to some pretty out there shows. And I, I would just be sitting there going, what am I doing here? You know, and a lot of screeching. And at some point I began to understand that it just when it was the point where I thought I couldn't stand it, it would change. And or even if I didn't like it, I could look around the room and be interested in like, well, who's there? What's the backdrop and this and that. And it really taught me a lot about how nothing lasts. As harsh as you think it is, it's going to pass. And it also just helped me to open my mind. And I will attribute that to free jazz. I don't think that was his intention of taking me to those shows, but it did change something in my brain. Yeah, yeah. And being open is it's a lot harder than people think it is.
Yes, it takes work and it takes energy. I think some people, it comes more naturally to others. For me, you know, I have to really have that moment of you know, even if it's just 10 seconds of meditation, knowing that, okay, this is fine. This does not have to last forever. I can always leave. Like there's there's nothing's permanent,
Right.
and just live in the experience. And so far it's worked out for me. I've experienced some things that I've never thought I would. So I really encourage people to try something new.
You know what, that I can always leave is at one time, many years ago, my sister called me. She's like, oh, I'm going to this meditation thing. Why am I going? It's such a beautiful weekend. So-and-so dragged me into this. And I said, well, if you don't like it, you can just leave. Sunday night, she calls me. Her voice was completely different. She said, I don't know how to explain it. It was so amazing, blah, 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 blah. Just because when I said you can always leave, she's like, oh yeah, I guess I can. And it allowed her to sort of step into that, and life-changing.
Yeah, you can always change your mind.
You can always walk out of a show.
Absolutely.
There's also something sometimes when you don't, that's when you find something.
Right. Live in the discomfort for a second.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of vices, drugs and alcohol are about as well, right? Just the anxiety of living in that discomfort.
Absolutely, because it gets rid of that.
Yeah.
For a time.
Yeah.
And you know, that's I mean, I would have, if I had to give a speech or, you know, something social, I mean, there was no, they had to be sure they were serving wine or I wasn't going.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, it was, you know, all the planning and things that start happening as the disease progresses is really remarkable. I mean, how much energy people with addiction put into maintaining appearances is just really, really, I mean, there's energy now that I get to focus elsewhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And not have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Just, you know, I'll only speak for myself, but I've noticed, you know, going from being a very anxious person to having, I think, what is a natural level of anxiety, being anxious at the right moments and things of that nature, because we can't get rid of it. And I think it's natural to feel anxiety. You know, and of course, if it's debilitating for somebody like it became for me, you know, seek help. But knowing how to live with it now and not having to always have some sort of game plan is just such a peace of mind that I've never had before.
Yes. It's interesting because now the population, there's so many people claiming that they're paralyzed by their anxiety.
Mm.
Claiming, I didn't mean that to sound harshly, but it's also, you know, if you're not in discomfort and you're not having any anxiety, are you really growing? Are you really learning? Are you really stretching yourself? You know, because if you do stretch yourself, you're going to feel discomfort.
Right.
And so it begins, and I know for some people it's paralyzing. I'm not in any way trying to dismiss that. But I also want to encourage people to, you know, when you start feeling really anxious, you can just go, oh, okay, what's different here? What am I feeling here? Why is this hard for me? You know, start asking yourself those questions, and you might actually be able to work your way through it to some degree.
Absolutely. You know, I a couple years ago, and then more at Hazelden, I studied DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, and they have so many tips and tricks and exercises you can do for those moments.
Yeah.
As opposed to self-medicating or medicating, period, which I'm all for medication if you need it. You know, I take it. But you're exactly right. Just acknowledging the moment and being present in the moment, as opposed to I was notorious for thinking in the future always.
Yeah.
And the amount of dread, existential dread that I lived with every waking and sleeping moment, frankly, was paralyzing.
Yeah.
And it's not easy to, I'm not saying I'm perfect by any means. I still struggle with that. But I'm sure of a lot better at it. And again, just the peace of mind that brings is really remarkable. I never thought I could achieve that.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, sometimes when I think back when I was younger, I just thought that I started a new job. I just thought I had to know everything.
Mm-hmm.
And, that's just not how life is. Like, we learn things as we go.
We do, and we make mistakes. And
Make
I'm I learned about perfectionism, and that is not a good thing. Of course, you want to always be, you don't want your doctor to be some second-rate hack, so there's a difference between perfectionism and excellence in what you do. And perfectionism leads to, really hemming yourself into staying within your comfort zone. And it leads to procrastination and things that all drive up your anxiety. So take the risk, make a mistake. It's okay. I would used to sit and draft an email for an hour, a paragraph email, and rework it and rework it and rework it and rework it. And I know, sometimes I would never even press send, because what if it's not right?
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that heavy? There's a French expression, perfect is the enemy of the good.
Mm.
And it's interesting that in the US anyway, there's this obsession with the best this, the best that. It's like, it's the best for you. You have to decide what is the best doctor for you, what is the best restaurant for you, what is the best. There is not just one best.
Right.
And that's goes along with that. I mean, that must be very prevalent through our society. I think that's
I agree, and it's so limiting.
yes.
You know, yeah, I sort of wear as a point of pride my perfectionism, but I didn't realize that it was how damaging it was, and how it really stunted growth.
Yeah, it does stunt growth, and the pressure it puts on you.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect is it's just untenable.
Yeah,
Like you
really.
say, you spend 3 hours on an email and you don't even send it, and chances are that person would have read through that very quickly
Exactly.
and not even notice what you noticed. Yeah, yeah. Well, so this is a very nice conversation for me, but I would like to just bring in how does your being a Native person interact with any of this in any way? Or, I mean, I think that's really unusual that you're a Native guy in Germany studying piano and opera.
Yeah, they thought so too. But growing up, I was really ashamed of my heritage and my background. There's a racism runs rampant everywhere, but especially in northern Minnesota,
Yes.
surrounded by 3 large native reservations. I wanted to be as white as possible.
Mm,
And it's not until recently that, I've really been, that I am accepting and open and embrace my heritage.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I can't imagine growing up in a place like Bemidji. I mean, many years ago, I was partnered with a Native man, and I remember my landlord, which really surprised me, was very prejudiced. He was from northern Minnesota. And he said some things that just sort of stunned me. And then my Joe at the time, he wanted to, Oli, my landlord, had a big shop in his basement of tools and stuff. And Joe wanted to make some knocking sticks because we were going to go ricing. And all of a sudden, that totally changed something in my landlord. I don't know why. but all of a sudden he saw him as a different kind of a person than what he was used to thinking of him as. And so we used to go up north a lot. We used to go up to Canada and to the reserve up there. And it really opened up my life in so many incredibly beautiful ways. And I think that's one of those things where we're so used to being in these boxes that we don't even understand what we're missing.
Mhm.
You I mean, of course he had grown up with terrible hurt and prejudice, and at the same time it opened up this whole new world for me. It's we really, all of us, I hope we can get to the point where we can let that down a little bit and see people for who they are. I mean, he, in a way, like you, I remember this one guy from Portland met him and said, he's sort of a Renaissance man. And I said, yeah, he was a painter. He put on his classical music. He would have liked opera. He's very gentle, the way he dressed. And that guy in Oregon was just sort of shocked by that because he wasn't expecting that from him. But, to free ourselves, to be ourselves is really, important, and it's not easy to do. And I was
Yes,
just
like
curious.
everything, requires work, and I'm certainly not free of stereotypes, and it's just, again, keep being open and willing to meet people and engage people and live in the present moment. You may surprise yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I'm sure you're surprising others because you're very smart, and you're doing your opera, and that's not what people expect when they think of a native guy from Bemidji. So
Right. Yeah. When I tell them about my background, they're baffled.
yeah,
But I was lucky to have two great supportive parents that helped me a lot along the way.
yeah. Well, clearly they allowed you to flourish and follow your spark, which is really beautiful. Not all parents are able to do that.
Mhm.
You would never have gotten as far as you have if they hadn't.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, is there anything you want to leave with today? I just appreciate your being so open about your experience, and I wanted to touch back with you because for whatever reason, you're just like one of those people that knowing you're in the world was important to me. And I can't even explain why. I just felt that, and that's what I responded to in your message, and then seeing you on the street. And
Well, I first I love your countenance, and when I cold called you about the Schubert karaoke and you knew what I was talking about, I thought, I love this lady. But in closing, I think just whether you suffer from anxiety or addiction, my main takeaway from this entire experience is connection. It is so important to make connections and to keep connections.
yeah,
The second you start isolating, bad things start happening. And I can't emphasize enough how important it is to reach out for help, because you will be surprised how many people will come to your aid.
isn't that beautiful? Yeah. And especially after coming out of COVID, I think so many people were so disconnected. I mean, it just heightened it. Obviously, it was already happening for many, many people, but COVID just brought it to this peak height of alienation and disconnection, and we forgot how to be together.
Yeah,
Truly.
truly.
Yeah. Well, I hope that we run into each other in our West 7th neighborhood. We could
I
grab
would like that. I'll meet you at Claudia anytime. So
yeah.
thank you very much for having me.
Oh, thank you, Abe. And it's really a pleasure to see you.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Thanks.